Hello, everyone, and I think Voltaire's just not feeling very well today, that's all. Hello, Phantom Cooper.
This one takes me straight back to my high school days, but not because I was in high school when it came out. No, I'm older than that. But this Tones on Tail sample takes me right back to my adolescent dance floors, as well as the sample of the Twin Peaks theme. I was in high school in Washington State when Twin Peaks, the show, kooky David Lynch show about Laura Palmer and her friends at her Washington State high school came out. I can tell you my high school was not as sophisticated, nor the students as good looking as on Twin Peaks. Really good looking on Twin Peaks. Wow. But they sure did nail one thing about the Northwest, and that's the creepiness of the forests and the odd characters that can inhabit them. It is a deeply kooky place. And I, Portland, Oregon born, and proof positive of that. I'm going to stay on the Twin Peaks theme. Thank you, Moby. And play you the opening song of Nicholas Jarre's Essential Mix he did for Pete Tong now 10 years ago. Oh my gosh, time flies. 2012. That was. It's a very eclectic mix, which you can listen to right here on Mixcloud. And if you're a fan of the likes of the KLF and the Orb, you will definitely enjoy the journey he goes on. And this is Angelo Badalamenti taking us on his musical journey with David Lynch. And it's a lovely way to close this week's circle.
This is the keyboard that all the major themes were created for Twin Peaks. It's an old Fender Rhodes and kind of beat up. And David would sit right over here, right to the right of me, and we would put a little cassette just about over here on this keyboard, just keep it in record and just keep it playing. David would sit here and I'd say,
I don't know where Mandela Man is myself, so you're as good asking anybody else than me. I've not been. I think he's been on sometimes in the week, leaving some links. If you can believe it, still links to the Super Mario Brothers film, which he seems to most definitely view in as one of the best animated films ever, for instance. But he's not here today, so I don't know. I think Voltaire, all I know is he's just not feeling well, so hopefully he'll be feeling better soon. I did a show on Thursday that you can go back and have a look at if you're interested. Obviously, most people associate shows with Sundays, but so that's why I'm doing one anyway. Other
platforms, but I rarely post. And who knows?
What on earth? What's that? Sorry, I pressed the wrong thing.
Well, what do you see, David? What is, just talk to me. And David would say, okay, Angelo, we're in the dark woods now. And
I'll just play the
there's
end
a
of
soft
this.
wind blowing through some sycamore trees. And there's a moon out, and there's some animal sounds in the background. And you can hear the hoot of an owl, and you're in the dark woods. You know, just get me into that beautiful darkness with the soft wind. And I started playing. And David would say, Angelo, that's great. I love that. That's a good mood. But can you play it slower? And I'd say, slower, David? Okay. And I'd go. He says, that's it. That's a good tempo. Just keep it going slow like that. Just keep that going for a while. And in David's mind, you can just see that he was visualizing the description that he envisioned. Then he would say, okay, Angelo, now we got to make a change, because from behind a tree in the back of the woods, there's this very lonely girl. Her name is Laura Palmer, and it's very sad, but get something that matches her. And I just segued into this. And he'd say, well, that's it. It's very beautiful. I could see her. And she's walking towards the camera, and she's coming closer. Just keep building it. Just keep building it. And she's getting close. They'll reach some kind of climax. And I would go, and he said, oh, that's it. Oh, that's so beautiful. Angelo, oh, that's tearing my heart out. I love that. Just keep that going. Now, she's starting to leave. So fall down. Keep falling. Keep falling. Keep falling. Now go back into the dark woods. That's it. Keep going. Just keep going.
Yeah, I am late, and yeah,
Very quiet and
it's.
mysterious.
Thank you for listening. Please like, comment, share, and come back next Saturday. Same witch time, same witch magic.
That's, I presume, called the Bewitching Hour with Animatronic, who's known from the well-known band Scissor Sisters, particularly well-known in UK and Europe, I think. I'm not sure about elsewhere, but anyway, they actually had a song called Laura. Anyway, I was sent this this link to Where's the Party At with Animatronic from an email that I got from Isabella Mars. I'm not sure if that's entirely the right name, but I mean the real name of this person, obviously. But I've been in sort of touch through the YouTube comments with this person who seems to be doing bootmaking of all things and has some kind of store in London. Sort of boots that could be worn by dancers even. And this individual, though, has also been posting a lot on YouTube, a whole host of sort of noir films from America, going back to, say, the 40s, even before possibly, and onwards. And then even a British film recently. I'll give you a link to the account, which is interesting. This Isabella Mars wrote to me, "Hello, James. Last week, I came across this by chance and thought you might want to use it on your show. It's just a short audio clip, but I think Mandela Man would get a kick out of it in particular." I figure you won't get a copyright strike. At the most, it would be a copyright claim. But if you're not monetized, that won't matter anyway. Well, I am not monetized. And they sent a detailed timestamp and everything like that. I got another response when I was mentioning about uploading films, about if there might be any British films that they would upload to their YouTube channel that could be interesting. I asked them where they got the movies from, and they said, well, I get them from everywhere and anywhere, depending on the movie. It's quite a chore, especially to find the best quality that exists. The Internet Archive has huge amounts of movies, though often they aren't at the best quality. It's always worth looking there. You'll be surprised what you can find. I think people forget about it because it's not so fancy. Just kind of a good description of it. There's so many places, lots of those legitimate but free, smaller streaming services often have a lot of old movies, TV type movies, new ones. I come across so many of them. If it's an old movie, you can usually find it one site or another. Of course, there are always other ways. She means, torrent sites and illegal websites and all that sort of thing. I'm sure you know about already, but there's no magic to it. You just make a search for any old movie you want and you will likely find it. Finding the movie is easier than negotiating the copyright issues. I do put British movies. I suppose there just aren't as many as US movies to choose from. And it just depends, probably in terms of availability, certainly. But yeah, there's probably more films made in America in the past. And it just depends on what I happen to think of at the time. These British movies are on their channel, which is called Isabella Mars on YouTube. Young and Innocent, aka The Girl Was Young, that's 1937, Alfred Hitchcock in HD. The Third Visitor, aka The Tertiary Caller, 1951 murder mystery thriller. And The 13th Letter from 1951, which is actually Canadian, but with some British cast. Then they say, for sure, you should check out this one, Real Classic Noir. It's a really good copy because it's a great deal of work was put into preserving it. I'm quite certain Lynch loves this movie, though I won't get involved in all that intellectual film talk. It's just from what I see in the movie. I think the scenes, scenarios, and cinematography will look familiar. It's completely public domain, so you can live watch it or use clips without worry. The film is called Too Late for Tears, aka Killer Bait, 1949. So I haven't watched that. I'm definitely thinking of doing watch-alongs of some of these movies that they've uploaded, Isabella Mars has, because, it seems like the choices are good. And this kind of thing really interests me. I think, you can stretch your point, and I like the mention of not being too sort of forcing an intellectual kind of discussion onto it, because if images and things resonate and remind you of Lynch, then that's as simple as it can be. It's if films back then had maybe a shot of some water in a river or a stream or something, and it's just that basically, an establishing shot or intervening shot, then obviously, depending on the nature of the film and everything, it could be something which might remind you a bit of Twin Peaks. So, and certainly the show, the first 2 seasons were informed by that cinema past, and then they mention on Friday, Saturday, I just gone, I will upload a much newer movie in full color. You might find that one interesting as well. It was released shortly before Twin Peaks, British movie, and has some similarities to the David Lynch style somehow, I think. Well, see what you think. I think you'll find it interesting and enjoyable. And that is, that is bearing in mind that I may have even seen some of this film before, which has just been uploaded on the channel. It's something in Paris. I forgot what it's called now. Midnight in Paris or something like that. I'll just give you the link to the channel, hopefully, in a second. Or Paris by Night, 1988, neo-noir psychological thriller film starring Charlotte Rampling. I'll just show you the screen for the channel. Paris by Night here. There you can see the channel called Isabella Mars. The icon for it is a big red shoe, one of the shoes which are actually produced by this channel. And one thing that really intrigued me by them, other than the fact that they were just leaving comments on the videos, was one of their old videos had a link to one of their shoes being used in this kind of presentation performance that featured SS Damfino, a ship. And I thought, what is this? What's all this about? So that's how I got in touch, really. Anyway, if you want to find that, and I recommend you to subscribe to Isabella Mars on YouTube for sure. Something you'll find might be of interest there. Okay, well, I was just checking to see if anyone else was going to come on now, but it doesn't look like it. Yeah, I completely agree with you, Phantom Cooper. It's really interesting that they would go to this time and effort to do it, really, for it's not like they're doing it for any kind of, any sort of sense of being rewarded or anything of that sort. Just bear with me here one moment. I've got to turn my heating down. It's just... Sorry, I got locked there in the boiler room. Thanks for the comment saying finally you're late and then nothing after that. No contributions. It's really helpful. Thank you. Going down that sort of, non-intellectual kind of discussion route, which, I have a lot of, I think is kind of one that I have a lot of time for, and in particular with Lynch. I think well, first of all, I would ask people in the chat, like, how many times in films that you've seen have you heard somebody say either something along the lines of listen to the sounds, as is said at the start, obviously, of Twin Peaks: The Return, and well, more and more so, I would say, are you aware of many films or anything that you've seen TV, which is like, has a character saying anything like, listen to the sounds, or listen to those sounds. I like to take time out and listen to those sounds. I like to listen to the sounds. This sort of thing. I don't know. How many films come to mind for you? For me, I would say not very many, if any. I can't remember any at the moment that come to mind, for instance. And this feeds into the idea that in different sort of forums, etc., that discuss Lynch, like Reddit, etc., there's often people who ask sort of questions of, what do you think Lynch watches generally? What films has he been watching lately? What's his viewing habits, basically? And you can kind of just think either, okay, I agree, I believe what he said in interviews, where it's just, I watch some kind of show about maintaining motorcycles, etc., and that's it. But then another person actually responded to this with, even though I think Lynch, as they say, he doesn't often mention what he's viewing a lot. They said, I'm sure he gets a batch of the Oscar nominations, for instance, discs, and might have a look at ones from that, which are going to interest him, of course. And going back a while now, at one point he did say he liked the Bourne films, the Bourne Identity, etc. Which is not, that's not giving a response, which is sort of, I've been watching this particular sort of indie art film, But at the same time, I can entirely sympathize and feel the same myself about the Bourne films, having watched all of them, including the one with Jeremy Renner in it, and I'm a fan of those for what they are. Dan says he's watching Dennis Hopper's directed films at the moment. The last movie this week. Interesting, but very disjointed. Yeah, and I think that's, a useful thing to mention in terms of Lynch as well. I think the disjointedness of, if we come to Twin Peaks: The Return, and it's not sort of something which happened just along the way by accident, that it turned out as being so disjointed and all over the place, really. going from one place to another, one scene to another, without any seeming connection or flow in the story. At a lot of the time anyway. So obviously it was deliberate to a degree, at the same time as not being like an intellectual exercise. I think it just went whichever way it wanted. You could argue more along intellectual lines whether that is, beneficial for the work or not. But hello, Ashton, and thank you for the good wishes for Voltaire. So to get back to this kind of thing, there's sometimes films that I want to have a rewatch of for different reasons. And it's sometimes interesting when you sort of realize connections and certain sort of reasons why you're going to be intrigued by watching a film, which of course I've seen before more than once, but quite a while back. So by enough time has gone by that I'm certainly going to appreciate it a little differently, especially if perhaps my TV might be a bit better than the one, for instance, and I've got better headphones and all this kind of thing. But yeah, this film was nothing out of the ordinary or sort of, an art house production as such. It was The Lovely Bones by Peter Jackson. And in many ways, I don't think this film is in any way particularly... it's not great as a whole. It doesn't entirely work as a film, really, but I think that gives it a certain, you can appreciate it on that level, really, even though, I think Peter Jackson is a really good director. Of course, Naomi Watts was raised to screen icon level with King Kong, which he directed, of course. I'm not saying that jokingly, but I mean, I think obviously Mulholland Drive was the big thing which broke her in Hollywood, and then she carried on to Gore Verbinski's directorial excellence with the Ring, which is a really good film, a really good adaptation of the original film and all that kind of thing. But in another way, comparable to something like The Lovely Bones, in that it's sort of slightly hampered by its reliance upon just visual I don't know. It's just visual bombardment a little bit. I mean, I think the Lovely Bones is very much the biggest user of that of CGI and all of this kind of things. I used to think that a little bit, that Lovely Bones was a bit of a turkey and things like that, but now I'm more in the middle, where I think it's one of these films which is I think the act of compromise in its making has resulted in its flaws mainly. It's a 12 certificate here, and the fact that it's basically made to be suitable to 12-year-olds. This is one of the issues, in that sense of, if it had been a 15 certificate, then it could have had a bit more of a depiction of the actual, murder and rape of this young girl, of course. But I'm not saying I want to see any of that, of course, in any detail. But I think just something which might have made it a bit stronger could have helped in terms of certain things about the film. But I don't think it's a bad film by any means, though. It's at least interesting. But I do remember at the time that it was it was sort of sometimes written off a bit as being like a real Hollywood turkey from Peter Jackson, you know, in some sense. But to be going somewhere with what I'm talking about, I think, for instance, the idea that obviously Lynch will get through his door various screeners for nominees and things like that, or at least films which people would hope might be nominated, or I'm sure The Lovely Bones was amongst those. And I have come upon this amazing realization this week about that film in relation to Lynch, which I don't know if anyone, particularly like Phantom Cooper, will scoff at, but I think it's quite surprising in terms of its use of the Song to the Siren by the Cocteau Twins, which Lynch wanted to be in the soundtrack for Blue Velvet, but for some reason the copyright couldn't be cleared at that point back in 1985 or 6, and so now later on he goes to use it in Lost Highway. It's kind of interesting to think like how maybe it could have been more effective, for instance, in Blue Velvet, you know, this kind of thing. I've certainly heard some people who are disparaging, you know, some critics, etc., who have made disparaging remarks about Lost Highway, and certainly I wouldn't agree on bashing that film particularly, but I don't think it's a perfect film by any means. But sometimes we like films, you know, for their imperfections. So, hello there to Isabella Mars, of course, who I was speaking about in the whole intro, and thanking you for the podcast from Animatronic. I watched some of Ghosted by mistake. I'm shocked at how truly terrible it is. I'm so confused. I don't know how it could be so bad in every way. Ghosted? I don't even know what Ghosted is. It's a show on TV. Or a film, sorry. It's a film. Oh, well, it was directed by Dexter Fletcher, which is unfortunate. Well, I mean, you know, it's unfortunate for him then if it's terrible, but he's got like something, I suppose, of a bit of a career more in the Hollywood world, and Google users 77% liked it. But Dexter Fletcher was known in this country for Press Gang, which was a sort of children's TV sitcom that was actually really quite well made. But then prior to that, he was a young actor and was in The Elephant Man. That's the little boy who's with Treves. But yeah, thank you for coming into the chat, and thanks again for all of the correspondence, Isabella. It was really interesting, honestly. I really want to have a look at this, new film you've put up there, the Rampling film. So I am aware of that. I may have even seen it back in the day a little bit, but the book was bad. There's no way the movie could have been better, to be honest. Lovely Bones. That could be part of the problem to some degree, in that the narration, you know, from the teenage girl and everything is quite whimsical and sort of, I don't know, it's like, I mean, certainly I've read a bit of the book, and I don't know to what extent, but it's like it's tending towards more upbeat most of the time, which seems a bit hard to swallow when she's been killed. This idea, regardless of whether she's, in some kind of purgatory or going into heaven or whatever, all that kind of thing. I mean, there is a certain point. I think really the film is partly perhaps saved by the central performance from Saoirse Ronan. But when her father's being played by Marky Mark, it's just. I mean, of course, he was great in Boogie Nights and everything, but that's different. He's not really suited to this. But Stanley Tucci, or however you say his name, was really good in it. So I'll just show you the clip that I want to show anyway, though. What I'm convinced about in terms of this is that this scene must have had stuck with Lynch for good or bad. Regardless of what you think of The Lovely Bones, I think this scene in itself is done quite well. So, I must say I don't fully agree with you, Phantom Cooper, in terms of that level of the film's 1 out of 10 or whatever. I'd certainly see it in a fairer light than that.
Easily add video communications to your mobile app and website with Vonage Video API. With just one line of code, you
I come here almost every day. I like to listen to the sounds. I like to listen to the sounds every day. I like to listen to the sounds.
This is how Lynch would have watched this scene.
I like to listen to the sounds.
Pete it!
Have you seen Holly?
Okay, well,
Did she tell you about this place? Yes. Then you must be ready. I'm Flora Hernandez. The others.
I think Phantom Cooper's just angry that she's not as good as actress as this young girl here. So,
Who's that? I don't know. But
this Mortal Coil, what am I talking about? Cocteau Twins. What's-
ships, oceans. I did all my best to smile to your singing eyes.
So, yeah.
Fingers drew me up into your eyes.
And of course, the symbol for transcendental meditation is a tree looking very much like that. So I don't know if this resonated with Lynch in some way particular, but he must have been listening to the sounds at the very least. And the fact that it was using this song, which he said is one of his favorite ever. So, I mean, I'm not saying that Lynch watched The Lovely Bones and then had some kind of creative brainwave, or epiphany. It's just that it's, I think on some levels it's an enjoyable enough film for its creativity, even if it does seem. I mean, once you look at this scene, like obviously the music's good. Some of the effects are good there with the cornfield and everything. Obviously, it's not real, but when you get the girl running through the mist or coming out of nowhere, in the distance, and she's got the ball in her hands. I mean, it literally looks like some kind of TV advert for life insurance or something, which, that is a flaw. But the film as a whole, I certainly view it quite positively, but just flawed for sure, So, good evening to Gary. Yeah, it's a new movie. I just looked it up. It says 2023. So, the review titles on IMDb are far more entertaining than the movie. Well, I'll have a look at them. So, it's enough about my lovely bones, sort of like conspiracy theory, I didn't think, like, obviously that Lynch was watching The Lovely Bones and then wrote down, listen. I like to listen to the sounds because I think everything to do with Lynch, and sounds and his films has always been there. This connection between the image and then introducing the sounds and how he was painting, and then he said he wanted to see the painting move, and then he heard like the wind and things like that. So it's part of me just trying to figure out what it means in terms of Twin Peaks: The Return, when Cooper is instructed to listen to the sounds. I mean, one idea could be that basically what's going on in terms of all of the different scenes and scenarios that don't seem connected in many ways throughout The Return. All of that is one thing, you don't have to necessarily have a major interpretation of that, even if it's Cooper, even if he's looking at this as his dream or somebody else's dream. Actually, it's interesting how the lyrics in that song to the Siren are, "Did you dream I dreamt of you?" as well. So that's what I don't really. It just sort of leads me off. It's almost like I'm making myself spaced out just by talking about it a bit, really. So I'll stop trying to really figure it out and just let it be. Anyway, thank you for the ghosted recommendation, Isabella. That's really good. IMDb. Still got 3 out of 5 on IMDb. Not that really means anything whatsoever. Because you could essentially have a bunch of people just coming in where a lot of people rate it 5 and then the same amount come in rating it 1, and you then end up with a medium figure, which would seem inaccurate generally. What am I doing there? Right, stop that screen. Oh, sorry, I've done the wrong thing. Let's put Ghosted on again. Yeah, the ads for Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 have gone into turbo speed already. Although it is out in just over a week, so seems like they're just trying to grab as many people at the last minute, just with a barrage of adverts. Because then, they didn't even know it was out or coming out, and so they're like, okay, I'll go and see it, rather than ads for it sort of half a year in advance, and by the time it comes out, they're fed up. So. Silo, was that the guy who was in the second season of the OA, which I was going to mention, but it's Chris Evans and Ana de Armas, which is I don't know. I mean, they don't strike me as having like some kind of mass on-screen chemistry, really. But she always kind of lights up the screen, I would say. But in a film which is basically supposed to be an action comedy, I presume, romance, then I don't really. One thing I don't know. I mean, this could sound a little bit like crazy, but if you're going to just have women who look like models in films, or who are just there for look, because they look very pretty, right? It's like, what is the point of this in an action film? What if especially if they're supposed to be part of the whole action and things? And I'm not trying to be sexist or anything, but the opposite, in fact, really. Why can't you have a woman who actually looks sort of like, like a kick-ass woman? But then again, I know a lot of people did like Ana de Armas in the last Bond film. So, well, there's 228 reviews, so I won't go through all of those at this point. Just that would drive me a bit insane. Evans could really have used a vibranium script. There is barely a single line of dialogue that rings true. No chemistry between the two leads whatsoever, as I just mentioned. Evans, hobbled with a beard and an inhaler, still comes across as the ultimate alpha male. Is he? I don't even know. I don't think that even makes sense. I mean, even the film title is bad. He's not really, I don't think, very good. It's just awful. Warning, spoilers. Apple should stick to electronics. The Succulents, 3 out of 10. Zero chemistry again. Huge disappointment. And then suddenly, 8 out of 10. Great fun. All of these 1s and 2s are ridiculous. This one was probably by Phantom Coupe, I imagine. I gave it an 8 rating just to bring the average up. It's good of you, I must say. I'd hate for anyone to miss out on the fun due to the poor average rating. Anyway, the whole thing was like an amusement park ride. I had no expectations of a great film, just the hope of entertainment. Okay, so it's not actually 8 then. What is it? Nothing about this is good. Honestly, what the heck? Steer clear of this atrocity. It's the worst. Chris Evans, go back to Captain America. Ana de Armas, we need to figure out what to do with you. Well, she was good in Blonde, so, but I don't think they're thinking of a sequel to that one. With this cast and crew, how did this happen? Idiotic movie. This is a great review, really, I think. Filled with cute and action, but no bite. Okay, filled with cute. And then the one below it is even more descriptive. Mr. and Mrs. Shit. That's a bit of a, I think, probably thinking of the film Mr. and Mrs. Smith, which is actually on TV, I think tonight or this week in the UK. Not that I'm a fan of it, but you know, Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie. Dear me. There are fake 10 out of 10 reviews, probably. I'm not going to start going through all of those. Ashton says, "Hey James, did you ever get the chance to watch the Bumblebee Flies anyway?" What, since you mentioned that yesterday to me, I think. Unfortunately, I've not been able to watch it due to having to rewatch. I've been doing a mass rewatch of The Lovely Bones, which costs £1.50. The reason I got this on DVD is because if you want to rent it online, it was $5.99. Well, it wasn't a rent, actually. You buy it. That was it. It didn't give you any option to rent it. So. No, I've heard of the Bumblebee Flies anyway. Whether I've heard of it as a children's book or whatever in the past, when I would have been quite young, I'm not sure if I've ever seen the film, but it sounds interesting to me enough anyway. So thank you again for the recommendation, and I do want to watch it. Ghosted seems like that Christina Ricci film called Miranda. I don't know if I'm getting mixed up. I don't know that film. All right, 2002. I thought it was that film that she made where she was in a pedestrian accident or something and got badly injured, and then it's a film I've never watched. Miranda, though, came out in 2002. Yeah. Not very well known, really. I don't think in the UK, certainly. It seemed to have one of those ones that just fell through the cracks. I vaguely remember it because it was really a time when Christian Ricci, she was just making, a lot of films. After like The Opposite of Sex and those Buffalo 66 and a lot of other films. So. Filmed actually, though, in London and Scarborough. Scarborough is the location also to that film. The Possession film that came out last couple of years or so. St. Maud. Aunt Maud. That's the sequel, anyway. In other news this week, the trailer for the new sort of update of The Exorcist has been shown to a select few. Apparently, it's being called Exorcist Believer, which sounds fine, I suppose. The write-ups on the trailer are saying it's like the scariest Universal pictures have ever made and all this kind of thing. But the description of the film sounds fine. It's all about, as long as it kind of comes out half decent, let's hope. But I would obviously hope for it to be very good, but I don't know. It's sort of the description of what happens in the film is there's two young girls, I believe. Or anyway, they go missing in the woods near where they live. And then they come back 3 days later without any knowledge of where they've been and all this kind of thing. And so this is exactly the same as happened with the Log Lady and Carl Rodd and Major Briggs, I believe. So sounds incredibly Twin Peaksian, but and to be honest, like, the director, David Gordon Green, and his Halloween films were decent enough for what they are. I mean, he doesn't stand out as being some kind of massively arty director, but then neither did the guy who made the Starsky and Hutch film, and then eventually made The Joker, which turned out well. So the worst thing would be to just that it just feels like they're trying to just like recreate the same style as the original Exorcist in some way. So oh yeah, you can get a lot of Kex bargains, Gary. I mean, if you go upstairs and you want to watch DVDs, then yeah. I actually read somebody saying that if you watch on a 4K TV, if you watch a Blu-ray on it, that it'll look better than streaming 4K, really, which shocked me a bit. So yeah. I'm not really that surprised, because I do think the distinctions between going from between like Blu-ray quality or HD and things to up to 4K, it's not massively always that distinct or noticeable. And it also really depends on how the kind of the creativity and coloring and everything of the film is. So it's like watching The Pope's Exorcist in 4K. I'm not really sure that it would kind of improve the film particularly. It's just, you just feel like you're seeing more sharpness to it and detail, perhaps. But the eyes can only see so much detail anyway. 4K really makes more sense, especially on the big screen, I think, because it brings something to films that hasn't been able to be achieved before. Please go, study on the criticism of Kex or Sex or whatever the shop's called. So I'm sure I probably would like Dark Shadows. That's something that I'm not familiar with because of it never really being shown in the UK. to me. I mean, when I was growing up and everything, I used to record Twilight Zone episodes, and then there was in the 80s there was a new Twilight Zone series, which I think was okay. But Dark Shadow was never really made, really given a outlet in the UK so much, I don't think. I know they did a new sort of reboot of it and everything, but that's because basically, Dan, when people are looking through all of the, if you go upstairs into the one in Derby, there's no sort of real ventilation of any great effectiveness or any sort of air conditioning, certainly. And people can get internet, particularly in an excited state, whilst browsing the shelves. And also, there's just no ventilation and etc. So it's usually warm up there. And, people start sweating. So, I mean, anyway, it was sort of like an interesting experiment for me to watch this Lovely Bones on just DVD and see how it looked. Like, in some parts of the film, it just looked crap, really, honestly. It looked a bit below par, like almost a bit fuzzy in some of the images, but then other ones seemed to look pretty decent, really, pretty decent. It was a daily show. Blimey. Very surprising. In terms of talking about sort of, earlier I was talking about the aspects relating back to Twin Peaks, etc., in terms of and otherworldly aspects, all this kind of thing. And recently I've been rewatching quite a bit of the OA, seasons 1 and 2. Not the start of season 1. And especially in the second season, at times it does feel like it starts dropping references here and there to Lynch's work. There's some scenes where she goes through, a portal type of thing, and it's all just sort of accepted as if it's like just part of the show. And so it becomes, the show sort of wavers between being almost just a less interesting sort of fantasy show where you just accept, that there's this sort of crazy shit going off, basically, like in, say, Quantum Leap or something like that. But it's all often filmed in quite a serious fashion, especially with the youngsters in it and the characters. So I definitely appreciate it and like a lot of its sequences. Sometimes I think my one issue with the OA is that it kind of almost feels like it's over egging the pudding with its very absurdity and fantastical elements, because it almost feels like it's spoiling it, and you need that hinge slightly between what is supposed to be the real world, and then it really becomes clear, like, even if there is any real world element by the second season. But I do really think that the second season is a great advancement from the first series in many ways, with its sort of detective storyline and so forth. And then also filming set, and a lot of it in a slightly wider image and with a more cinematic kind of look. I appreciated that. So yeah, the makers of the OA have a new TV show that's coming out on FX called Retreat. So that'll be interesting to see. Ever since the OA was cancelled by Netflix, there have been a hordes of fans who've basically petitioned and done various events where they're sort of maybe doing some of the movements and all this kind of thing that occur in the show, but not necessarily right now, but they were. One person was even doing a starving themselves, a protest, but which seems not going too far. But the makers of it went down and actually spoke to that person who was doing that, so hopefully they helped them and everything. But yeah, of course they basically thought that the show has to be renewed, or that possibly Netflix and the makers of it are in a way staging a sort of false cancellation of the whole thing, which or it could be somewhere in between. Like, there's no major intent, but it's possible to interpret it that way, because Netflix then said, we're very much open to working with the makers of it again. So, which kind of makes you think, well, if you are, then why would you cancel a show like that? But yeah, that could be for many different reasons, And it's quite difficult to think of how the OA would have progressed after the second season in many ways. So. Okay, well, I think I've dried up the topics that I wanted to discuss now, but I think it's been a good hour or so. And appreciate everyone having a look and viewing. So, and thank you for saying today is 430. Yes. Thank you. It is the 30th of the 4th, 2023. So tomorrow is May. Thank you everyone for tuning in. I hope you're all doing all right, and I will see you very soon, I'm sure.